We're in the company of Vasishta, an enlightened and immortal crow, and the celestial has come to him for spiritual teaching. The celestials got fed up with being driven by sense pleasures. And this is what celestials do actually. Celestials pursue enjoyment, they pursue pleasure. His attention is continuously being attracted to pleasures. But he knows, he's heard the spiritual teachings, he knows there's more to things than this. The celestial continued, "Please tell me of that which is limitless and which is free from growth and decay, and which is pure and beginningless and endless. For up to this time I've been asleep, as it were, and now by the grace of the Self I've been awakened. Kindly save me from this terrible fire of delusion." So he's had a bit of an awakening, this celestial. Something shifted, and it's described here as by the grace of the Self. Beings are born and they die after being worn out here. All this is neither for dharma nor for emancipation. This is the cycle. We get born and gradually worn out, like an old bit of machinery. Or we have a breakdown. There does not seem to be an end to this wandering in delusion. The celestial will be assuming that there is rebirth and it carries on in another life. The pleasure centres in this world only intensify this delusion and are ever changing. I do not delight in them. I have seen and enjoyed all the pleasures of the heaven. The desire for such enjoyment has been reduced to ashes by the fire of discrimination now. I wonder if you've indulged yourself in something which you assume is pleasurable, but you're not getting any real pleasure from it. But you've got the idea that you're going to get pleasure from it, so you carry on indulging yourself. I suspect that a lot of the time that we think that we're having pleasure, we're not actually having a very good time. Whether it's sitting for hours in front of the telly, whether it's having a night out with the boys and girls, getting drunk, whether it's indulging in some comfort eating, or whether it's something perhaps more sophisticated. Are we really enjoying ourselves? This is the question. Are we really enjoying ourselves? And I suspect that we're actually caught up in the idea of enjoying ourselves, and there isn't actually much enjoyment going on. But we've got to tell ourselves, that we're enjoying ourselves. We've got to convince ourselves that we're enjoying ourselves, because what else are we going to do? So I think what's happened with this celestial is there's been a moment of honesty, a moment of personal honesty. He's realised, I'm not enjoying this. I'm being led from here to here to here to here. I'm pursuing this pleasure. It's like worn out chewing gum. Although I don't think the celestial would have said that. But this is the experience. There's no real enjoyment anymore. The desire for such enjoyment has been reduced to ashes by the fire of discrimination now. And I think we can understand that discrimination as the personal honesty. Just admitting it to yourself. I don't really enjoy this anymore. I'm just going through the actions. I clearly understand the havoc caused by the senses of sight, hearing, smelling, tasting and touch. What shall I do with these repetitive enjoyments? Even after 1,000 years of their enjoyment, no one is really satisfied. Even if one enjoys the sovereignty of the world, with all the pleasures that come with it, what is so extraordinary about it? For all these are subject to destruction and death. Pray tell me what there is to gain, from which I shall attain eternal satisfaction. This is quite a nice story actually, because normally the stories are based on suffering. But this celestial hasn't suffered. This celestial has had thousands of years of pleasure. and realised there must be more to it than this. So we've had stories about suffering and about why there's so much suffering, what can we do to get rid of suffering. But this celestial wants to get rid of pleasure, because the celestial realises that pleasure is ultimately unrewarding, and he wants satisfaction. He wants that which is going to bring eternal satisfaction. And he realises it's not in where the senses are going to direct him. I have now clearly understood the poisonous nature of these sense experiences, which only intensify my suffering here. He alone is the real hero in this world, who is determined to give battle to this formidable army known as one's senses. This army is commanded by the ego sense. It is endowed with horses known as sense experiences. It hath completely encircled the city known as this body. Even the holy ones have to battle with these senses. Only they who come out victorious in this are truly great. The others are fleshy automata. Well, are we caught up in our senses or are we not? I'm one of these people. When I go out, I look at everybody. I'm always looking, trying to catch something, a buzz of some sort. But I thought I would try a Buddhist practice whereby you just keep your gaze focused 6 feet in front of you on the ground and have a look at this urge I've got to connect. And it was actually quite pleasant. I felt a little bit rude being caught up in my own space, but that's a bit silly, isn't it? People don't know me. I remember a story of a Buddhist monk who did this practice for years, and he sat under a tree much of the time, and he could only tell the passage of the seasons by the fall of the blossom and then the fall of the leaves. And I remember thinking this was quite a sad story, because the monk never looked at the tree in all its glory. I thought, this monk is missing out on so much. But I realise now that this monk had found something, and he wasn't going to be distracted from it. Something more glorious than the tree. The Buddhists don't talk about the self, but I think there was a similar realisation. The Buddhists tend to talk about void or emptiness, which doesn't sound very appealing. But we could say that he was focused on the vibrancy of his own being, and that's what brings true happiness. So it's interesting, as I was walking along, there's this pool which wants me to try to engage with those around me. But actually, if I didn't give in to that, the ground actually became quite fascinating. And I felt my own sense of being becoming richer. I'd actually taken control, not in a brittle, narrow way. It's like a puppy dog on a lead going all over the place. It needs to be firmly directed once again. So what happened was my attention wasn't being distracted and diverted continuously. We actually want our attention to be like this most of the time. But this is ultimately unfulfilling, unsatisfying. But to take control of the attention, bring it back to itself, and keep the senses in check by keeping the gaze focused 6 feet in front. And if you're not caught up in any particular drive or strong emotion, then you can come back to yourself. You can come back to your own sense of being.